Adaptations, Variation, Natural Selection, and Selective Breeding by Mr. Wilhelm's first period class.
Adaptations. A change in the structure or function of an organism or any of its parts enables organism to survive in its environment. Variation. A difference in structure from the others of the same species or group.
Natural selection is the process by which forms of life having traits that better enable them to adapt to specific environments. Selective breeding is the intentional mating of two animals in an attempt to produce offspring with desirable characteristics.
Further explanation. Sometimes organisms change due to mutations. If the mutation is good, it leads to variations. As more good mutations are passed on to offspring, more variations in species become present. Variation will lead to natural selection, also referred as survival of the fittest. It is when organisms with stronger mutations survive and the organisms with weaker mutations die. Well, those with strong characteristics will pass those characteristics on.
When the good mutations get passed on over many generations, they become known as adaptations. They might take hundreds, thousands, or millions of years. If an entire species isn't able to adapt, it will become extinct. When animals are bred on purpose to get desired traits, it's called selective breeding. However, selective breeding can also bring about bad or undesirable traits. People take control of the breeding process, so new varieties of species can be produced.
Example of adaptations. There's a group of elephants in a forest. Over time, the elephants reduce in size. The smaller elephants will survive better than the bigger elephants because the smaller elephants will travel easier to get food than the bigger elephants.
Example of natural selection. Arctic foxes survive better in the Arctic than red foxes because Arctic foxes blend in better with the snow than red foxes.
Example of selective breeding. A mule was bred to have the strength of a horse and the sure-footedness of a donkey.
Example of variation. Butterflies come in many different shapes and sizes and patterns. Therefore, there are many different variations of butterflies. This diagram is an example of selective breeding and variation. If you were to breed a pink dragon with blue horns and yellow wings to a green dragon with purple horns and blue rings, you could get an offspring such as a pink dragon with purple horns and blue rings. Credits, first period.
Emily Harwood,
Emma Wagner,
Kylie Ernst,
Alice Kidd,
Diana Reyes,
Kaylee McLaughlin.
Woo! I'm awesome.
Biodiversity and Sustainability paper slides. Mr. Wilhelm's class, period 1.
Biodiversity is the change or variety of life in an ecosystem. Sustainability is the ability to sustain life in an ecosystem. These two factors depend on each other to survive. That is what our slideshow is about. So sit back and enjoy. This right here, as you can see, is the tree of life. Whoa, sorry, video camera moved, earthquake, okay. This right here is the tree of life. There's an owl nest right here because it is the tree of life. Barely hanging.
Vocabulary. Biodiversity is the variation of life in an ecosystem. The more biodiversity, the better. Sustainability, the ability to sustain life in an ecosystem. Sustainability depends very highly on biodiversity for a more stable community.
Further explanation.
Biodiversity affects sustainability. The more biodiversity, the more sustainability. A biodiverse community has more sustainability than a community without biodiversity. Like I said before, sustainability depends highly on biodiversity to make a stable community.
Examples. A rainforest is a very biodiverse environment. As you can see, there are many coconut trees and a sun. The ocean has an unlimited amount of sustainability because, it's underwater, water makes up most of the world, and there's plenty of fish and other oceanic crops. Biodiversity. This is a baby polar bear being separated from the polar bear's mom. This is a bottlenose dolphin trying to eat the clownfish. This is half of a bald eagle that got half of its body cut off. This is an unknown plant, and this is a bunny that's white with brown spots, not brown with white spots.
The end. Credits: Director Colin Williams, Executive Producer Colin Williams, Producer Colin Williams, Stunt Double Number 1 Colin Williams, Costume Design Colin Williams, some other stuff CEO Junaguri, Mr. Wilhelm Period 1. Credits by Colin Williams. This has been a Colin Williams production. The end.
Goodbye.
In this slideshow, we will be talking about physical and chemical changes, how different things are altered, ice melting or a leaf on fire. This is an interesting topic, so get ready to learn.
Vocab. Chemical change when the substance composition changes. Physical change. Changes in which the form of matter changes but not its composition.
Further explanation. Our topic is chemical and physical changes. If you are wondering what these things are, here's an explanation. A chemical change is when something changes and can't be changed back, like a piece of paper catching on fire and turning into ashes. That is a chemical change. A physical change is when something changes but it can also change back, like ice. It melts into water and freezes back into ice.
Example. Physical example. When you cut paper, it is called a physical change because it does not change and it is still paper. Chemical example. When you burn paper, it is called chemical change because it is changing form.
Additional. When a leaf turns on fire and then becomes ashes, that's a chemical change. Ice cube, when it starts melting and then it goes to water, that's a physical change.
An animal cell structure and function.
Plant and animal cells are similar and different in many ways. Plant cells and animal cells have both mitochondria, cytoplasms, and cell membranes. Plant cells have cell walls, while animal plants don't. Plant cells have chloroplasts, while animal cells don't. All of these similarities and differences help each organelle do its function.
Vocabulary. Mitochondria. An organelle that is both plant and animal cells where it produces energy for the cell. Nucleus. An organelle that is in both plant and animal cells where it stores chromosomes and DNA for reproduction. Chloroplast. An organelle that is only found in the plant cell that produces food in the color green.
More vocabulary. Organelle, an organ inside the cell used for a specific function. Cell wall, an organelle in the plant cell that protects and controls what comes in and out of the cell. Cell membrane, an organelle in both plant and animal cells that controls what comes in and out of the cell.
And the vacuole is an organelle that holds water.
Further
explanation. Plants use chloroplasts in its cell to make its own food by converting energy from the sun into glucose. All cells contain a nucleus, the control center of the cell. Both contain mitochondria that provide energy for the cell. Cell walls are extra protection for the plant cell.
The end. Credits. Title slide Pranav Kumar. Introduction Pranav Kumar.
Vocabulary Kushal Patel.
Further explanation Pranav Kumar. Title colors Pranav Kumar.
Intro colors Kushal Patel.
Vocab colors Pranav Kumar.
And Kushal Patel.
Credits Pranav Kumar.
Presentation help Morgan Hutchison.
Credit colors Pranav Kumar.
And Kushal Patel.
Presentation Pranav Kumar.
Kiran Kushal Patel.
Kumar
and Patel.
Team effort.
With some help from Hutchison.
Photosynthesis. The process by which plants and autotrophs turn the sunlight into sugars. Photosynthesis, which is basically autotrophs in plants turn the energy of sunlight into sugars. Chloroplasts, which are tiny organelles in the plant cell where photosynthesis takes place. Chloroplasts, carbon dioxide in the plant, then the sugar and the oxygen come out of the chloroplast, which is in the plant. Which 6CO2, which is pretty much is carbon dioxide, H2O, which is water, and light go into the plant, and sugar C6H12O6 and oxygen O2 comes out of the plant.
Here's our example.
This is pretty much what we just said. It's just showing a picture of it, which is sunlight and carbon dioxide goes into the plant and go into the chloroplast, which is in the leaves. Comes out, sugar and oxygen come out of the chloroplast.
My critics are Chris Lozano, Jordan Doris, and Cameron Sauber.
Boo.
EOC review. Topic 6. Adaptations, variation, natural selection, and selective breeding.
Summary. Adaptation happens because when you pass on your genes, then it passes on good mutations to your kids, and then your kids passes their genes to their kids.
Vocabulary. Adaptations, a change in structure or functions of an organism to help it survive. Variation, a difference in structure from others of the same species or group. Natural selection, process which forms having traits that enable to adapt to specific environments. Selective breeding, intentional mating of mutually interdependent parts that maintain various vital processes.
Explanation. Adaptations, variation. Good mutations allow organisms to pass the mutations on to its offspring. Variation is better mutations that are passed on. More variations of species become present. Natural selection. When it's stronger, it means it will survive longer. Weaker will mean it will die faster. Natural selection is referred to as survival of the fittest. Natural selection occurs when good mutations are passed on to offspring. Selective breeding. This is when animals are bred on purpose to breed desired traits. Selective breeding can bring bad or undesirable traits. Mutation. If mutations are good, it helps organisms to live. If mutations are bad, it often causes organisms to die.
Example, as time passed because of mutation, the neck got longer as a result of giraffes have adapted to longer necks.
Dude, they're so cute.
Credits, Haley Hearn, Noah Caldwell, and Elizabeth Fernandez, third period.
Go Boise.
EOC review paper slides, Ecological Succession. What ecological succession means. Ecological means the world, like anything that happens in the world today. Succession means a series of changes in a community in which new populations of organisms gradually replace existing ones. Introduction. Ecological succession is the process of creating a community. Succession means normal, gradual changes that occur in the types of species that live in an area. Vocabulary. Primary succession is the colonization of new areas, communities of organisms. This process takes place on bare rock, meaning that the colonization of organisms is already on bare rock. Secondary succession means a process of recloning and community with the soil base already there, meaning the organisms already create a new community with the base already there. Primary succession is the first organisms to colonize a new area, as in organisms coming to a new place. Climax community means a mature community that doesn't need any more succession because it's already been grown.
Example. This is the process of primary succession. Pioneer community is little grasses and lots of rocks, which turns into shrubs. Then middle-aged trees turn into full-grown trees.
This is secondary succession. Basically, it's where, like, let's say if a forest fire is happening and secondary succession takes place and creates a new forest. Credits:
Valerie Avina
and Ariana Paknajad.
EOC review: food chains and food webs.
You probably already know what a food chain is, but what about a food web or an energy pyramid? A food chain is a diagram that shows who eats who in a community, and a food web is multiple food chains linked together. An energy pyramid is somewhat similar to a food chain, showing energy flow from one organism to the next. A food chain is a graph of who eats who in a community. It's usually made up of 4 levels: producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, and tertiary consumers. A food web is multiple food chains woven together. If the tertiary consumer on one food chain eats the secondary consumer on another, for example, they can be linked together. A producer is an organism, almost always a plant, that produces its own food, mostly through photosynthesis. It's eaten by a primary consumer, which is the second level of the food chain. The primary consumer is then eaten by the secondary consumer, the third level of the food chain. There can be more than one secondary consumer in a food chain. The tertiary consumer, the top of the food chain, then consumes the secondary consumer. The tertiary consumer can eat all levels of the food chain most of the time and is not limited to eating the secondary consumer. An energy pyramid is similar to a food chain, showing the energy flow from one organism to the next.
In this diagram is a representation of food chains, food webs, and energy pyramids. It starts with food webs, many food chains linked together. This branches out to food chains, a diagram of who eats who in an ecosystem, and also branches out to energy pyramids. Energy pyramids are charts that show the energy flow in a community. From food chains, you get producers. Producers are at the bottom of the food chain and are usually plants. After that comes primary and secondary consumers. The difference is that primary is the first to be consumed and secondary is the second to be consumed. After that comes the tertiary consumers, who are the top dogs. Finally, none of this could happen without the sun, the energy source for the producers.
In this, we have 3 food chains, all linked together to make one food web. In the food chains, the producers are almost always plants, who get their energy from the sun. From that, there is primary consumers, secondary consumers, and finally tertiary consumers. So everything starts with the sun. And so then we go to producers in the first food chain. And the energy goes from the plant to the bunny, and then so on. Then they're all interconnecting, which makes a food web. This is an energy pyramid. As always, everything starts with the sun. At the bottom of the pyramid are the producers, or plants. 90% of the energy doesn't get passed on, which means only 10% moves up. And that is why it gets smaller as we go up. The giraffes eat the producers, getting 10% of the energy. Next, the secondary consumers, the hyenas, eat the giraffes, taking only 10% of the energy. Last but not least are the tertiary consumers, the lions. As you can see, the top is the smallest because there is less energy being passed on. Credits: Hannah Holtz,
Erica Olson,
and Samantha Crouch.
in 4th period science.
Organic versus inorganic compounds paper slides. Yay! Don't fail your EOC. Make sure you know enough on organic and inorganic compounds. The vocabulary includes organic compounds, inorganic compounds, compounds, and carbon. An organic compound contains carbon and is also living, while an inorganic compound does not contain carbon and is not living.
A compound is a combination of 2 or more pure elements that are bound together chemically, and carbon is an element that is always in organic compounds.
Carbon dioxide is the only exception to the organic and inorganic rules because the carbon is not bound to hydrogen, which makes it inorganic.
Examples of organic compounds are an apple, a worm, a flower, and even a polka dot bikini because of their chemical makeup, which includes carbon. Examples of inorganic compounds are rocks, carbon dioxide, air, and a steel bar, also due to their chemical makeup that does not include carbon.
Organic and inorganic compounds are everywhere around us. We breathe them, eat them, and use them on a daily basis.
Organic compounds, also known as living compounds, because of what they are made up of. Carbon is an element that must be present in order for a compound to be organic.
Inorganic compounds are also known as non-living compounds due to the lack of carbon that the compound needs to be organic.
More examples of organic and inorganic compounds include clouds and air, which are inorganic, while humans, cows, moo, trees, and grasses are organic. Credits!
Okay, Alexis.
Alicia.
Rachel.
The end!
Ta-da!
Welcome, and this is Biomes and Biodiversity, featuring oceans, tundra, tropical rainforest, deciduous forest, grassland, and desert. Next slide.
Okay, now this is the introduction. Biome is a really big ecosystem that covers large areas. Biodiversity is all, note all, like plants and stuff, life in a specific area. Biomes have different levels of biodiversity, and the lower the biodiversity, the lower the sustainability. Next slide, please.
Vocab. Biodiversity is the variety of life in a given area. Not the amount of life, but the variety of life. And then there's sustainability, which is largely dependent on biodiversity. It is the ability for a biome or environment to sustain, and then you have your biome, and which, of course, is a very large ecosystem, which Matt told you, characterized by distinctive facts like their climate and soil conditions, and animals live inside of them which need those soil conditions and life. Now, one of those biomes is a tropical rainforest, which is a forest that has high rainfall and heavy green plant life. Then there's deciduous forest, which is a land with many trees and woody vegetation, kind of the opposite of green plant life. And then there's the tundra, which is a treeless biome, much like a frozen desert. And then grassland, a land dominated by grass, rather than trees and shrubs.
It's completely just flat grass, corn.
And then another one, the desert, which is obviously hot, dry, and dusty, with very few plants. The plants that live there can accommodate with the low moisture. Then there's the oceans, which is the largest biome, covering 3/4 of Earth. And these are separated into 4 saltwater zones.
Okay, next slide, please. Now we have further explanation. You ready, kids? Each biome has a different level of biodiversity. In order from greatest to least biodiversity, they are the tropical rainforest, the oceans, the deciduous forests, the grasslands, the deserts, and the tundra. The less biodiversity in an area, the less sustainability, which we've been over for like 49 times, is the ability to sustain life. So the tundra is a very fragile biome because it has little biodiversity. And you can see here that this one obviously has a lot of biodiversity because it's all the pretty colored people. This one has none because it's all the same. And this one has a lot because it's all the different colored fish, and this one has almost none.
Examples. Now then, this is pretty simple. On the top you have the desert, which is dominated by very little plant life, those cactus, which are able to sustain life in a desert. And then grassland, which is dominated by grass and dirt, obviously. No trees, no shrubs, grass and dirt.
Okay, these are the credits. The research, everybody did the research. Who cares, did slides 1, 5, and 7.
Me, Joey, I did slides 2 and 6.
And I, Max Patrick, did slides 3, 4, and what you're about to see, which is the extra credit.
Just drop it.
Okay, now then,
Up.
There you go.
Perfect.
Here you have a very woody, large
there,
tree,
big tree
with very little green on it.
this represents the deciduous forest because you'd find many trees like this in it.
And then the
Here-
next one, the small one.
Tropical
tree back
rainforest,
there.
because it is the opposite of the deciduous forest, seeing as it has very little wood to it and lots of green around it. Here you have a cactus. As you've seen before, one of the few plants that can sustain life in the desert because it is accustomed to low moisture and low water. This here is, I know it looks like an iceberg, guys, but it's a glacier actually.
thanks, Max.
And yeah.
It's for the saltwater oceans. Cause
No, it represents tundra.
Tundra, never mind.
Silly Matt. Anyways, here, and you're thinking this doesn't look like much, and no, it's not. It's grass representing the grassland. That's what you get when you go to the grassland.
And
Just
then-
grass.
Perfect little pink tree.
Sea anemone, which represents, you can pronounce it any way you want, which represents the oceans because it's one of the many plants, one of the many life forms in the ocean.
Okay, so that was our presentation. Hope you enjoyed it, and goodbye.
EOC review paper slides, body systems, structure, and function. Our review is over the body systems, structure, and function. We're going to be talking about the circulatory, respiratory, digestive, skeletal, nervous, excretory, integumentary, endocrine.
Circulatory system. This system pumps blood and moves material around your body. And it controls your blood flow, and it uses your heart, veins, arteries, capillaries, and blood to pump stuff in your body. Endocrine system. Okay, this is like when a girl is like obsessed with like one direction one week, and then the next week she's like, ew, I don't like them. Anyway, so that's like hormones and stuff, and it regulates like your hormones and your body growth and your homeostasis, which is like keeping your body balanced. And it uses your adrenal gland, thyroid, and pancreas. Nervous system. This is like what you're thinking, and it uses your 5 senses, and like it also regulates homeostasis. It uses your spine, brain, and central nervous system. Integumentary system. This is like your skin. So like these two leafy things are blood vessels, and that's like your hair root, and that's your sweat glands, and those are your blood cells. And it uses sensory response, it protects you, and it regulates body temperature. Respiratory system. This is used for breathing, and it uses your body, it supplies your body with oxygen, and it uses your lungs, nasal cavity, diaphragm, and bronchi. And it inhales oxygen and exhales carbon dioxide.
Digestive system. This system is the breakdown of food. It goes down the mouth, esophagus, and small intestine to a further breakdown, and large intestine to absorb the nutrients. And it goes in your stomach and comes out the anus. Excretory system. This system rids the body of waste, such as integumentary, digestive, respiratory, and urinary. Skeletal system. This aids the body in movement. It provides structure and support, and it gets calcium from dairy products. The major organs is bones, cartilage, and ligaments. Credits: Corinne Chandler, Savara Maida, Johan Kavor. 4th period, science class, USA, Texas, Allen, 75013, Tatum Drive, B212, Mr. Williams, Science, Pre-AP, IB. Thank you.
Okay. End of course review paper slides by Catherine Leiker and Astrid Adaptations, Variation, Natural Selection, and Selective Breeding is what it's about.
Okay, this is our introduction. When an animal is living in an environment, it is called an adaptation. Variations are differences between two different types of species or more. Natural selection has to do with
It's what nature decides what an offspring will look like. And selective breeding has two parents, and they decide what their offspring will look like with what genetic traits they want. And these slides, we will review adaptations, variations, natural selection, and selective breeding. They will explain the difference between natural selection and selective breeding as well.
Okay, adaptations is how an animal adjusts to its habitat. Variation is different. Natural selection is the original breeding of nature. Selective breeding is when humans choose the genetic traits.
Okay, this is our further explanation chart that we did, and in the middle, as you can see, it's adaptations, and off to the side, there is variation, mutations, natural selection, and selective breeding. Variation, words that have to do with it, is difference and groups, because you separate the species into different groups. Mutation has to do with change and adapt, because that's basically what it is to animals that are in a new environment if something that's vital to them is cut down or is gone. And natural selection has to do with nature and animals, because nature decides what traits the animals will have. And selective breeding is preferred traits, and it's on purpose, that both parents decide what their what genetic traits their offspring will have. That is the difference between both of them. Okay. These are examples.
Yeah, okay. Adaptations. When birds are in a tree, then the tree gets cut down. The birds have to go to another tree. Have to go to another tree and adapt to their new surroundings. Variation. If you try to breed animals, the results in what? Words. Oh, okay. Variation. Okay. When you try to breed animals, the results and genetic traits will differ. Natural selection. When you breed two animals, the traits that you don't choose are the natural selection.
It's nature.
Yeah. Selective breeding. When you breed two animals, but you want specific traits from the two animals, like the parents to their offspring, you would selectively breed the two animals for the traits that, specific traits that you want.
Okay. Okay, and this is our picture, which is our more explanation. And we decided to do selective breeding because I guess it's kind of difficult for most people to understand at first. So, oh god, okay. Oh, I skipped it. Okay. So, we're starting out with the female cat. It has a gray patch of fur on her tummy and also blue eyes. Smiley face. And then this is the male, and the male has a patch on of gray on his forehead, and he has green eyes. And so, if you look at the arrow over here, they mate and they have their offspring. And their offspring has one blue eye, one green eye, and it has a patch of fur on both parts of its body. And yep, that's pretty much it. And they decided that they wanted that. So,
the end. Credits to Catherine Margaret Leiker
and Astrid Soto.
Mr. Wilhelm, Science Period number 4.
Okay, we're done.
Hi guys. So this is our project, Asexual and Sexual Reproduction, by Hunter, Carter,
and Nathaniel.
Introduction. What our topic is about is asexual and sexual reproduction, are basically the ways animals and also other types of organisms reproduce. So here we have asexual. We have a single parent having two offspring that are identical. Then we have two different parents having a child that's diverse from the parents. That means different.
Vocabulary. Asexual reproduction is a reproduction of an organism with only one parent. Sexual is the reproduction of an organism with two parents making one. More diverse.
Vegetative propagation is pretty much the cloning of a plant. When a plant will split apart and then it'll have two things called runners. These are separate plants that are identical to the parent plant and will grow. Binary fission is a sexual reproduction of bacterium divided into two bacteria. if you have this bacteria, it'll slowly divide into two separate bacteria.
Yes, regeneration is when a broken part of an organism regrows itself like it never happened. So let's say this paper was alive and I cut a corner off, it would just regrow like it was nothing. And then variation is the differences from offspring to a parent. Now, this mostly happens with sexual reproduction because when two parents combine into one, they can have a mutation or something, and it creates diverse.
Further explanation. Asexual reproduction occurs with one parent. For example, this is an example for asexual reproduction. One parent making one offspring. The advantages it looks like. The disadvantages is that they're not able to adapt to the environment as well as sexual reproduction people or
Sexual reproduction occurs with two parents. See, right here, we have two parents creating one, or it can have multiple. It doesn't have to be one. Whatever the parents decide. Advantages, they have diversity. Disadvantage, they're more able to adapt to environment. Yeah, those should be switched. Disadvantage, yeah. Alright.
Examples. Asexual reproduction is, take this starfish for example. If you have a limb that is broken, then it'll regrow. This is regeneration. It's a type of asexual reproduction that allows animals and plants to regrow lost limbs or pieces.
Now, sexual. Sexual reproduction is when two different parents have a unique child with its own traits. So, as you can see from the pink parent and the blue parent, the pieces from the father and some pieces from the mother go to the child. Thus, they are unique. Now, it doesn't mean they actually take off the pieces and go. No, it's just their own traits. Additional slide. We have asexual. This is what we call budding. Let's see the hydra, for example. It has this little plant growing out of it. It breaks off and grows into two new plants, as you can see here. They're exactly identical. Sexual, you have Mr. Black and Mrs. White combining into mixed offspring. And then vegetative propagation. Let's say this is Plant Man. He clones into multiple plants. Yes, binary fission. You see an atom. Split it into two.
Chemical and Physical Change by Deanna Stigler,
Sam Wilson,
and Alyssa Brown. Chemical change. Chemical change is when a substance changes into a new substance, such as spinach and corn that are separate, that mix together but is mushed together, which turns into mushed spinach and corn. That is chemical change. Similarities. The similarities in both of them are both change in shape, size, and both change in state, such as plasma, solid, liquid, and gas.
Chemical changes do not get reversed, nor can they be reversed. Physical changes, on the other hand, can be reversed, and they can go back to their original state. Here we have a guy melting an ice cube, and here we have a guy pouring water in a bucket. Those are both physical changes. Here we have a guy lighting a piece of paper, and here we have someone else blowing up a work table. Those are both chemical. I think someone needs to call the cops on them. A physical change can be anything, from chewing your food to building a hotel on the riverside. Physical changes are described as when an object changes but remains the same substance. There are changes in size, shape, and state. The size is how big it is, the shape determines its perimeter and area, and its state is its state of matter, be it solid, liquid, gas, or plasma. Here we have a guy cutting down a tree. He should be yelling timber. That's a major safety hazard.
Examples. Wood burning would be a chemical example because wood can no longer become wood after it's been burned. Paper being cut is different because it's physical and you can also get the paper back. Food being chewed is also physical because it is using mechanical, which is not using any chemical form or anything else chemical. But food being digested is chemical. Paper being glued is also like paper being cut. It is physical and you can get it back. They all change. Credits!
Yay!
Slide 1, 2, and 3 were by Deanna. Slide 4 and 5 were Sam. Slide 6 and credits were by Alyssa. The end! Thank you!
Little known fact,
EOC review paper slides, organic versus inorganic compounds.
Inorganic and organic compounds. Today we'll be teaching y'all a little bit about organic and inorganic compounds. But two key words you'll really need to know to understand this are, one, organic. Something organic is something that is living. All things living are organic, and therefore include carbon. But we'll talk more about carbon later. Something inorganic is a substance that's not living. These things don't contain carbon.
Various vocabulary.
Carbon is the chemical element of atomic number 6, a nonmetal that has two main forms and occurs in charcoal. Carbon can also be found by itself. A compound is a thing that is composed of two or more separate elements, in other words, a mixture. An organic compound is an organic entity that is composed of two or more organic elements. And an inorganic compound is any compound that does not contain carbon, or in other words, any compound that's non-living.
Divine differences. The most common difference between organic and inorganic compounds is that an organism or object can only be organic if it is living. In the same way, an object/organism can only be inorganic if it is non-living. Another main difference is that inorganic compounds do not contain metal atoms, whereas organic compounds do not. Example 1. Is water organic? Why or why not? Here's a clue. The chemical formula is H2O.
Well, the answer to that is no. Water is not organic. We know that because of the chemical formula. No carbon, not organic.
Example 2. Is this sugar organic? Here's the chemical formula. C6H12O6.
Well, the answer to that one is yes. Sugar is organic. Once again, the clue is in the formula. The C by itself represented carbon, meaning that sugar is organic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is by
Chloe McFarland and
Lauren Gutnick.
PowerPoint by
Lauren Gutnick and content by
Chloe McFarland. Hope you
learned a lot.
Okay, this is the food chain, food webs, energy period. Food chain is pretty much a simple relationship of how the energy transports to the other animals. Like the grass gets eaten by the unicorn, and that means the grass's energy gets transferred to the unicorn, and then the unicorn gets eaten by the rainbow.
Sadly.
Yeah, sadly, and that means they get both energies to the rainbow. Food webs is a complicated diagram of relationships and food transformations between animals in an ecosystem. It's like a very long web like that a spider makes. Okay, so the magical bunny eats the grass, and so does the unicorn. And then the flying shark eats the unicorn and gets the energy from the grass and the unicorn. And then the evil rainbow eats the magic bunny and the unicorn and the shark and gets all of that energy. And then Domo eats the angry rainbow and the magic shark and the magic bunny and the unicorn and gets all of the energy. Producer! An organism that gets its own food from the sun. The sun gives the energy to the flower. It's a very angry sun.
The primary consumer is the first consumer, which is pretty much the first eater. And the secondary consumer is the consumer that eats the first consumer. And the tertiary consumer is the consumer that eats the second consumer, so it eats all of it.
Energy pyramid. Energy pyramid is pretty much the flow of the energy in the whole pyramid. Like, the grass gets eaten by the tiny Skittles, and then the medium Skittles eat the tiny Skittle, which gets both energies, and the big Skittle eats the rest of the Skittles and gets all their energy to the big Skittle.
The end. Creators by Morgan T., Chelsea G., and Sky H.
Body system, structure, and function. The heart, the skin, the brain, the skeletal, the oxygen, the mouth, and the thyroid.
by Rachel and Nusha. Excretory System. It gets rid of body waste, which is like if you eat something and you don't need those certain materials or something, then for your body need to function, then it gets rid of those wastes, like bacteria and all that.
Endocrine System. Hormones that regulate body growth. Like if you're short, you'll grow tall. Like if you're short, you grow tall. If you're short, then you grow tall. I'm sorry, I had to say that so much times. My mind had to process it. Anyway, so if like you're skinny, you might grow fat, because like, you know, girls, they get fatter. Guys, their voice gets deeper, and the skin system. The skin system is where it regulates body temperature, and keeps the body the same temperature. And it protects the skin, it doesn't protect skin, but it protects the veins and stuff.
The organs.
And please don't get sunburned, because that might lead to skin cancer.
Thank you very much.
Anyway, respiratory system supplies body with oxygen by breathing. Respiratory is like using your lungs, the oxygen, and the stuff you need to inhale and exhale every day. Okay, skeletal system. So the skeletal system is where the bones in your body help you support and move. It's kind of like bricks on a house that supports and protects the inside of the house. Digestive system. The definition: breaking down food and absorbs nutrients for the body's needs. Well, it breaks down the food, which is like a physical change because it's going from big to small. Well, an example of physical and chemical change would be your mouth, because like the carbohydrates are broken down, and this is a Pac-Man eating, and his nutrients level is going up. Circulatory system. Circulatory system is where your body circulates the blood and red blood cells and white blood cells around your body, and the blood goes to your heart. The nervous system controls thinking, senses, and regulates homeostates. Homeostates, in case you didn't know, is what keeps the body's balance. The brain controls your body like a remote control controls your TV.
EOC. Physical and chemical changes in the digestive system.
Mouth. Physical change, teeth that tear, gain, and crunch food. The chemical changes in it it turns it into saliva in your mouth. It breaks it down so you can go through your throat.
Esophagus. Did you know that food is transferred to the stomach via peristalsis?
Your stomach. The physical change, it spins and spinning of food. The chemical enzymes cause pepsin and stomach acids breaks down food.
Small intestines. Physical bile from the liver breaks down liquids into drops. Chemical. Large intestines. Did you know that water and materials that the body can use are here. Intestines are larger than your small intestines.
By Emily, Sandra, and Paris.
Goodbye. EOC review: food chains, food webs, and energy pyramids.
Food chains, food webs, and energy pyramids. They're all related, but different in their own ways.
A food chain demonstrates the flow of energy in an environment by using a single sequence.
Like the energy from the sun goes to the grass, and the energy from the grass goes to the mouse.
A food web combines several different food chains together.
Like the energy from the sun to the grass and the grass to the bunny, it's put together with the energy from the sun to the tree and from the trees to the panda.
An energy pyramid. An energy pyramid shows the levels of energy by using a pyramid. In the levels of an energy pyramid, it's producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer.
Producers can include grass, trees, flowers, and other plants like that. Primary consumers include small animals such as rabbits and mice. Secondary consumers include bigger ones such as foxes and snakes. And then tertiary consumers include animals like bears and wolves and lions.
So the energy from the producer goes to the primary consumer, and then so on.
Further explanation. A food chain shows the flow of energy, and food web, like we said, shows the flow of energy, but it's food webs connected in the energy pyramid. It shows the percentages of the energy. So for each level, it goes to 10%.
In this slide, we show an example of a food web here. The sun's energy uses the arrow to display the energy going to the grass, and the arrow that is there displays the energy from the grass going to the rabbit, and so on.
And then this is another food chain put together with that one to make a food web.
Our additional slide, it's just showing for this, it's showing the sun goes to the grass and then the bunny. And then this is a food web, so the sun goes to the phytoplankton, the fish, the seal, the whale, and the snake. Alyssa Moore,
Danielle Simpson,
Teresa Crawford,
Period.
Adaptations, variation, natural selection, and selective breeding. Adaptations, a change in the structure or function of an organism. This means like a bear, and it's like whenever it's cold, bears hibernate. That's an adaptation that they've learned over time to do.
A difference in structure. Oh, variations. A difference in structure from others of the same species or group. So that's like if like a white dog and a black dog like come together. The outcome is probably like it's either going to be a white dog or a black dog as their baby.
Natural selection, the process by which forms of life having traits that enable them to adapt to specific environments. Basically saying that it's created by nature and how it does its stuff or whatever. Selective breeding, the intentional mating of two animals in an attempt to produce offsprings with desirable characteristics. And that is saying that it's selective breeding, but with people, and they do.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. An adaptation. It's a bad adaptation, but it's more like a mutation. A two-headed calf, and organisms that have two heads don't usually last as long. So this is a bad mutation. And variation. This is an example of the white dog and the black dog creating either a white puppy or a black puppy. Okay.
by Christian Robinson,
Jesse Lamas,
Ian Dickerson.
Thanks for watching.
EOC Review, Biomes. Vocabulary, biomes, large geographic areas with similar climates. Tropical rainforest is a humanist biome. Deciduous rainforest is mostly forest. Tundra is cold, dry, treeless biome. Grassland ideal for farming. Desert, driest biome. Ocean's biggest biome.
Oceans. Oceans are the largest biome which feed on each other. Few organisms in the ocean produce their own food, and 90% of Earth is water.
Desert. It's very dry. It's the driest biome. No rain, less than 25 centimeters per year. Little plant life.
Tundra. The tundra is the coldest biome with lots of lichens on rock. A lot of Arctic animals, including hawks, owls, wolves, and reindeer. It is dark 24 hours during the day and covered in ice most of the time and receives little rain.
Rainforest time. Warm near the equator, most diversity in plants and animals divided into forest floor, understory, and canopy, and those are dividing the rainforest into different zones according to plants and animals. Yay!
By Lauren McFarlane and Lauren Schallenberger.